Welcome to LETC-Channel.
Welcome back to my podcast at LETC-Channel, and today's story is titled A Memorable Meeting.
The bus started moving early in the morning, before the sky was fully bright. I sat in my seat, feeling tired because of many busy days at work, but my heart was excited. This was not my first charity trip, but something about this one felt special. My friends had told me about the highland village we were visiting. They said it was a very poor place. The children there didn't have shoes or enough school supplies. Every day, they walked a long, rough path to school. I couldn't imagine how hard life must be for them, and that made me even more curious to see it with my own eyes. The bus drove along small, winding roads as we got closer to the mountains. On both sides of the road, I could see tall mountains covered in green trees. The mist floated over the forests, making everything look soft and magical. The sun was rising, and its light slowly broke through the clouds, creating golden beams. I looked out of the window, amazed by the beauty of nature. It felt like I had entered another world, a world where the mountains were huge and powerful, and we were just small visitors. I heard the sound of birds singing in the trees. There was also the sound of water flowing gently in a small stream nearby. The air became cooler and fresher. I could feel each deep breath filling my chest. By the side of the road, wildflowers grew, their small petals moving in the wind. It was as if they were welcoming us. The driver told us we were almost there, but the road became more difficult. The smooth concrete ended, and now the bus had to go through bumpy dirt paths with many holes. Sometimes, we passed close to the edge of a steep hill, and everyone held their breath. Finally, the bus stopped in a big open area. I looked out and saw some children playing nearby. Their laughter was loud and clear, filling the air with happiness. I got off the bus and felt the uneven dirt and rocks under my feet. In front of me was the village. The houses were small and simple, made of wood and covered with old straw roofs. Some houses leaned to one side, and their walls had patches of wood where repairs were made. Farther away, I saw smoke rising from a chimney. The smoke curled softly in the air, mixing with the mist around the mountains. I noticed a little boy standing not far from me. He was wearing an old shirt that had faded and had holes sewn up with different colored cloth. He wasn't wearing shoes, and his feet were dirty, but his smile was big and bright. He ran off quickly, and soon came back with a group of other children. They stood a little farther away, looking at us with wide eyes. I could tell they were curious, but also shy. A man walked toward us and introduced himself as the village elder. He looked strong but had a kind face. His skin was dark from the sun, and his voice was warm and gentle. He greeted us by saying, "Thank you for coming all this way to help our people." His words were simple, but they made me feel welcome right away. The elder led us around the village. The paths were narrow and made of dirt. I saw rice fields and cornfields, planted on the hills in straight lines. They looked like green steps going up the mountains. The fields stretched far into the distance, where they seemed to touch the sky. Everything here was calm and quiet, and it felt like time moved slower in this place. I noticed the people in the village were living a simple life. An old woman sat outside her house, weaving cloth on a wooden loom with her thin hands. Children ran around barefoot, laughing and shouting. They didn't have fancy toys. Some played with small cars they made from bamboo, while others tossed stones back and forth. Even without many things, their faces were full of joy, and their laughter was so pure. We stopped at the school in the center of the village. The school was very small, with only 3 classrooms. The walls were cracked, and the wooden desks looked very old. On the chalkboard, there were neat rows of writing. On the walls, I saw colorful drawings made by the children. I walked into one classroom. The sunlight came through the window, lighting up the desks and chairs. On each desk, there were old books. Some of the books had torn covers or missing pages, but they were stacked neatly. It was clear that the children took good care of them. Standing there, I felt many emotions. I felt sad because the village was so poor, but I also felt proud of how strong and hopeful the people were. Even though their lives were hard, they didn't give up. They believed in a better future. After the village elder finished welcoming us, the group began unpacking the gifts we had brought: clothes, food, school supplies, and some small toys. As I was helping to organize the items, I noticed a small figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It was a little girl, no older than 10. She stood quietly, clutching the hand of an elderly woman who must have been her grandmother. The woman gave her a gentle nudge, and the girl hesitantly stepped forward, her eyes darting between us and the ground. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was wearing a simple dress, faded from many washes, with patches carefully sewn onto the fabric. Her hair was tied into 2 neat braids, but some loose strands stuck out here and there, as if she had rushed to prepare herself. Her face was small and delicate, with cheeks that were slightly red from the cold air. Her eyes, however, were what struck me the most. They were large, dark, and filled with a mixture of curiosity and shyness. One of my teammates approached her with a bright smile, holding out a small stuffed bear. "What's your name?" they asked gently. The girl hesitated, glancing up at her grandmother for reassurance before whispering, "My." Her voice was soft, barely audible, but it carried a sweetness that made me smile. I watched as Mai took the stuffed bear with both hands, cradling it against her chest as if it were a precious treasure. She mumbled a quiet, "Thank you," and gave a shy smile. It was a small moment, but it stayed with me. After that, Mai didn't leave our side. She stayed close, watching us unpack and distribute gifts to the other children. Every time someone handed her something, a notebook, a pencil, or even a piece of candy, she would hold it carefully, bow her head slightly, and say, "Thank you," in her small, polite voice. As the morning went on, I noticed that Mai didn't seem as lively as the other children. While they ran around excitedly with their new toys, she stayed near her grandmother, sitting quietly on a small wooden stool. Her tiny hands were busy arranging her new belongings neatly into a plastic bag, as though she was afraid of losing them. Curious, I decided to approach her. I crouched down to her level and smiled. "Hi, Mai. Do you like your gifts?" She nodded quickly, her eyes lighting up for a moment. "Yes. They are very nice," she said softly. "What do you like the most?" I asked, pointing to the stuffed bear still tucked under her arm. Mai hesitated before answering, "The notebooks. I want to write and draw." Her answer surprised me. Most children would have chosen the toys or the candy, but Mai seemed different. There was something mature about her, as if she had grown up faster than she should have. I sat down beside her, feeling a sudden urge to learn more about this quiet, thoughtful girl. "Do you go to school here, Mai?" I asked gently. She nodded. "Yes, but it's far. I walk every day with my friends." "How far is it?" Mai thought for a moment before replying, "Maybe an hour or more." I was shocked. An hour's walk, through steep mountain paths, just to get to school. And yet, here she was, clutching her notebooks like they were the most important thing in the world. Her grandmother, who had been watching us from a distance, walked over and sat down beside us. She smiled warmly and began to tell me more about Mai. She explained that Mai had lost both her parents in an accident when she was very young. Since then, the grandmother had been raising her alone. It wasn't easy, her health was poor, and they often struggled to have enough food. Despite their hardships, Mai had always loved going to school. "She's a good girl," her grandmother said with pride. "She studies hard and always helps me at home." As I listened, I felt a deep sense of admiration for Mai. Despite everything she had been through, she carried herself with quiet strength and determination. I looked at her again, this time seeing not just a shy little girl, but someone truly remarkable. Before I could say anything, Mai spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to be a teacher when I grow up," she said, her eyes shining with hope. Her words hit me like a wave. I could see the sincerity in her expression, the way she clutched her notebooks even tighter as she said it. In that moment, I realized how much this dream meant to her. After spending a little more time with Mai and her grandmother, I couldn't resist asking more about their lives. Something about Mai's quiet strength and her grandmother's warm but tired eyes made me curious to understand their journey. As we sat on a wooden bench outside their modest home, the grandmother began to tell their story. Mai had been born in this village, surrounded by mountains and forests. Her parents were farmers, just like most people in the village. They worked hard in the rice fields and on the steep terraces, trying to earn enough to provide a good life for Mai. Her father loved her dearly, the grandmother said, her voice trembling with emotion. He used to carry her on his shoulders and tell her stories about the stars at night. But life in the highlands was never easy. The rains were heavy, often washing away crops. During the dry seasons, the fields cracked, and food was scarce. When Mai was only 4 years old, tragedy struck. Her parents were returning from the market in the nearby town when their motorbike slipped on a wet, rocky road. They both died in the accident. As the grandmother spoke, I noticed Mai looking down at her hands, her small fingers tracing invisible patterns on the wooden bench. Her quietness wasn't just shyness, it carried the weight of loss and hardship. After her parents' death, Mai came to live with her grandmother, who had been widowed many years before. The two of them shared a tiny wooden house on the edge of the village. The house was old and fragile, with gaps in the walls where the cold winds slipped through during winter. The roof, made of dried straw, often leaked when it rained. "We have little," the grandmother admitted, "but we make do." The grandmother's health had started to decline as she aged. She couldn't work in the fields as much anymore, so they relied on what little they could grow in their small garden. Sometimes, kind neighbors brought them food or helped fix things around the house. Despite these challenges, Mai took on many responsibilities. "She's such a good girl," the grandmother said, her voice filled with pride. "She wakes up early every morning to help me. She feeds the chickens, fetches water from the stream, and sometimes even helps in the fields when I'm too tired." Listening to this, I couldn't help but feel a deep respect for Mai. At such a young age, she had already taken on so much. Her life was a far cry from the carefree childhoods I had known. When the grandmother paused, I asked, "And what about school? Does Mai enjoy going to school?" Mai looked up at me, her dark eyes filled with determination. "I love school," she said softly but firmly. "It's my favorite place." The grandmother explained that Mai walked to school every day, even during the rainy season when the paths turned muddy and slippery. "She never complains," the grandmother said. "Even when her shoes wear out, she keeps going. She's always been like that, strong and determined." I learned that Mai was one of the top students in her class. She loved reading and writing, even though the school library had very few books. Whenever the teacher gave them extra assignments, Mai would eagerly complete them. "She always says she wants to learn more," the grandmother added with a smile. When I asked Mai what her favorite subject was, she replied without hesitation, "Math. I like solving problems." Her face lit up as she talked about her lessons, and I could see how much joy learning brought her. But when I looked at the few supplies she had, a small notebook with pages nearly full, pencils worn down to stubs, I realized how much she lacked. I asked her about her dream to become a teacher. She hesitated for a moment, then said, "I want to teach children in this village. I want them to learn and have a better future." Her voice was quiet, but her words carried so much hope and strength. She wasn't just dreaming for herself, she was dreaming for her entire community. Her grandmother nodded, her eyes moist. "Mai is my hope," she said. "I may not have much time left, but I believe she will do great things." Hearing these words, I felt a lump in my throat. The love and faith between the two of them were so strong, even in the face of so much hardship. It was clear that Mai's dreams weren't just her own, they were also her grandmother's. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the village, I couldn't stop thinking about Mai's story. Her life had been filled with challenges, but she faced them with courage and grace. She had lost so much, yet she held onto her dreams with unshakable determination. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the mountains in hues of orange and gold, I couldn't stop thinking about Mai. Her story, her quiet strength, and her unwavering determination to pursue her dreams had left a profound impression on me. I sat with her and her grandmother, the cool mountain breeze brushing past us, and felt a mix of emotions, admiration, sadness, and a deep sense of responsibility. I looked at Mai, who was carefully arranging her school supplies and small gifts into her bag. Her movements were slow and deliberate, as though each item held immense value. I could see the care in her actions, the way she treated even the simplest objects as treasures. It struck me how much we often take for granted, things like books, pens, or a warm meal. To Mai, these weren't just items, they were pieces of hope. As I sat there, I felt a pang of guilt. Back home, I had so much, an education, a comfortable life, opportunities that Mai could only dream of. Yet, here she was, in a tiny mountain village with so little, dreaming big and working hard to make those dreams come true. Her courage and resilience made me realize how fortunate I was and how much I wanted to help. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small backpack I had brought with me. It was nothing fancy, just a sturdy, colorful backpack filled with a few extra notebooks, pencils, and storybooks I had packed as spares. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was enough. But then I remembered Mai's bright eyes when she talked about her dream of becoming a teacher, and I knew that even a small gesture could mean something. "Mai," I said softly, holding out the backpack, "I want you to have this." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with surprise. "For me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, smiling. "Yes, it's for you. I thought you might need more notebooks and pencils for school. And there are some books inside that I think you'll enjoy reading." Mai hesitated, her hands hovering over the backpack. She glanced at her grandmother, who gave her a gentle nod. Slowly, she took the backpack from me, her fingers tracing the straps as if she couldn't believe it was real. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you so much." Her grandmother placed a hand on my arm, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You've given her more than just a gift," she said. "You've given her hope." I felt a lump rise in my throat as I watched Mai hug the backpack to her chest. It wasn't much, but seeing the joy and gratitude on her face made me realize the power of even small acts of kindness. As we talked more, I told Mai that I believed in her. "You're strong, Mai," I said. "And you're smart. I know you can achieve your dream of becoming a teacher. Don't ever give up, no matter how hard it gets." Her eyes shone with a mix of determination and gratitude. "I won't," she said firmly. "I promise." That evening, as the stars began to appear in the sky, I said goodbye to Mai and her grandmother. Mai stood at the edge of the village, clutching her new backpack, her small figure illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun. She waved at me, her smile bright and hopeful, and I waved back, feeling a deep sense of connection and purpose. Walking back to the rest of the group, I felt lighter, yet more determined than ever. Mai's story had touched me in ways I couldn't fully express. I realized that while I couldn't change everything, I could make a difference in small but meaningful ways. In that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. To keep helping, to keep supporting, and to keep sharing stories like Mai's. Because sometimes, all it takes is a little encouragement, a little kindness, to inspire someone to chase their dreams and change their world. The time came for us to leave the village. The sky was painted in soft pinks and purples as the sun began to set behind the mountains. The entire day felt like a dream, a mix of emotions, stories, and heartfelt connections. Yet, as I stood there packing up, it was Mai's bright eyes and hopeful smile that stayed with me. Mai and her grandmother walked with me and my team to the edge of the village. She carried the backpack I had given her, clutching it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. She didn't say much, but her presence was enough to convey her gratitude and determination. "Take care of yourself, Mai," I said, bending down to her level. "And remember, you have the strength to achieve anything you dream of." She nodded, her dark eyes filled with resolve. "I will. I promise to study hard and make you proud." Her words were simple, but they carried an incredible weight. It wasn't just a promise to me, it was a promise to herself, to her grandmother, and to the future she envisioned. As we said our final goodbyes, Mai's grandmother reached out to shake my hand. Her grip was firm, despite her frail frame, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you for giving her hope," she said softly. "You've done more for us than you know." I didn't feel deserving of her praise. What I had done was small, a backpack, a few words of encouragement, but to them, it was a gesture that sparked new possibilities. Walking down the narrow path away from the village, I turned back one last time. There stood Mai, waving at us with both hands, her figure framed by the golden glow of the setting sun. Her grandmother stood behind her, her expression calm but filled with pride. That image stayed with me, etched into my mind like a photograph. It wasn't just a goodbye, it was a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of hope. As we made our way back to the city, I reflected on everything I had experienced. Meeting Mai and hearing her story had been a humbling experience. She had so little, yet she held onto her dreams with a strength that I had rarely seen. I realized that it wasn't the material things we brought to the village that mattered most. It was the connections we made, the kindness we showed, and the belief we shared in each other's potential. Mai had taught me that even the smallest gestures, like giving a backpack or offering a few words of encouragement, could create ripples of change. Her story reminded me of the importance of gratitude. I began to see my own life in a new light, appreciating the opportunities and comforts I had often taken for granted. But more than that, Mai inspired me to take action. She made me believe that we all have the power to make a difference, no matter how small it may seem. As I share this story now, I hope it reminds others of the strength and resilience of those like Mai, who face challenges with courage and grace. Her determination to rise above her circumstances and chase her dreams is a testament to the human spirit. Sometimes, the most meaningful lessons come not from textbooks or classrooms but from the people we meet and the stories they share. Mai's story taught me that kindness, no matter how small, can be transformative. It showed me that hope is contagious, and when we believe in someone, we give them the strength to believe in themselves. And so, as I continue my journey, I carry Mai's story with me, a story of courage, dreams, and the unyielding power of hope.